Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we will be discussing in the course of these two talks today from 8:30 to 9:15 and tomorrow also from 8:30 to 9:15 the second part, because I just had one class. Most of you might have attended that, uh, where I just gave the background of what human personality is all about and what is the place of Diksha in that. Of course, I will be repeating those things. Most of the things I'll repeat, but the topic which we discussed today was that what is the goal or what should be the goal of spiritual life. Everybody talks of spiritual life, spirituality. What does it exactly do to us? How does our our nature or our human personality change as a result of spiritual practices? If those things are not clear, then the very purpose with which we uh, take mantra diksha or uh, try to get spiritual initiation is not served. So first, as we discussed in the class which on Vedanta and the science of human possibility, is that human body is a complex of body, mind, and self, which is pure consciousness. And we saw how body and mind, whether it is gross or subtle, they are just reflections of that consciousness, partial reflections. And Prakriti, the goal of our life, if we compare the consciousness as an ocean and ourselves as uh, the waves in that ocean, the waves come and go. Their name and form, uh, each wave has a name and form. It is either a huge tidal wave or a big wave or a small wave. So upon the surface, you'll find these waves, but deep within is the pure consciousness, the sea of consciousness, as you can uh, term it. So from the ocean itself, the waves have come. The body, mind, and the body mind complex, the psychophysical complex that we see, and the objects that we see around us, they are all creations of that, or you may say they have come out of that same Brahman, which is of the nature of pure consciousness. And we'll get true rest. The goal of spiritual life is to regain our identity, regain our real self. Our real self was of the nature of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, pure consciousness, which results in pure bliss. But because of Maya, or because of the power of Maya or Shakti, the creation itself begins. And as soon as the creation starts, the creation continues for some time and then it is destroyed. So it's just compared, the simile given is the waves that we see. Big waves come and gobble up some small waves. So there is this unending cycle of formation of waves, destruction of waves, and that is what causes all the tidal waves of joy as well as sorrow in this relative world. So only when the wave merges into the ocean and identifies, goes deep within, that is what we discussed, the spiritual heart, how to find the spiritual heart, what is meditation, and how do we do, what is sadhana for. Sadhana in case of the Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition is known as Upasana. Sadhana is a Vedantic word. Of course, there sadhana means trying to find out through nididhyasana what our real self is. So we'll discuss. So each constituent element, we see the human personality is a complex of body, mind, and self, which we discussed. Then each constituent element out of, of these needs, has its own need. Body has its own need, that is food. Mind has its own need, that is some kind of secular knowledge, skills, and other things. I mean by mind, I mean the reactive mind, the gross mind. which enables us to conduct ourselves in this world. There's nothing wrong in that. We need a mind, well-developed mind, a skilled mind, a trained mind. So it has its own need. And the self, the Jivatma or the self within, has its own need, and that is God, Paramatma. So the central problem in all in our spiritual quest, in our spiritual life, is to put this small self, which on account of its separation from the Supreme Self suffers tossed by this changes in the body and the mind. It is very obvious. Anybody who has lived in this world knows that there are good times, there are bad times. The body suffers, the body ages, the body is sick. So also with the mind, it is never stable. The waves, just as in the ocean, small waves rise, the big waves come and gobble them. Sometimes the waves, they are cut short and they just collapse. So many things happen on the surface of the ocean. But that doesn't mean that the ocean is like that everywhere. If we go deep within, the deeper we go and dive into our consciousness, the more stable we become. If we prefer to remain at the gross level, at the body and the level of the mind, and not focus on the self, we do not fulfill the total need of our personality. Just as the body needs food, but there is a limit. There is a limit to all those things. But so also the mind needs knowledge to survive in this world. But if there is excess, I mean, you just need each aspect of our personality has its quota, but the self needs God. So that is the beginning of our spiritual life. And the central problem in spiritual life is how to connect. We know how to acquire food, how to, we know everything about nutrition, we know everything, more or less we know a lot about our mind, we can handle it, we can train it to so that it obeys us. But what about the self? What about the Jivatma, which is also known as Pratyagatman? We'll come to that. That has to identify its need is to unite with the higher self. And the purpose, goal and purpose of Mantra Diksha is to learn how to do it. So the guru is one who helps the aspirant to do this. And in the Ramakrishna Vedanta tradition, we have devised, I mean, there is a method. The easiest method is through mantra, a technique known as mantra yoga or japa yoga, or you can say upasana, japa upasana. So what is meditation? So we said that the guru teaches the technique of meditation. What is that meditation? In India, it means there are two types of meditation. Broadly, if you classify, there are hundreds of types of meditation. But broadly speaking, there are two. One is nididhyasana, that is self-inquiry, which is followed by most of the Jnana yogis or Advait Vedantins, who try to find out the self by negating everything that is not the self. Everything that is temporary has to be discarded. It's a very, very tough path, because if we want the temporary things, if we cannot give it up, then it is very difficult, because unless you negate through the process of neti, the inquiry into the nature of the subject, and then that means you can't concentrate both on the object and the subject. If you go deep within, then you can't be on the surface. It is like asking a diver to be on the surface at the same time enjoy his diving, the calm bottom of the ocean. He can't do it. So nididhyasana, in this method, by the process of neti, not this, we go on eliminating everything. Tremendous vairagya is required there. You eliminate all the thoughts, all the vrittis that come without any mercy on them. You have to reject that and reject all the dear things that you see around you. If one is possible, if it is possible for one to do that, then he can dive deep into the self directly. He simply says, I have nothing to do on the surface, I'll just dive deep. Because he is capable of doing that. It's a direct method suited for only a few advanced souls who are known as Jnana Yogins. So once upon a time, it was thought, or even now it is understood, that it's only the sannyasins who have at least physically given up the world, who have not are not creating further bondages, they are eligible for this path. That is why Shankaracharya, if you see his commentary, when it comes to the practical side of Advaita Vedanta, he insists on this vairagya and giving up the world of dualities as Maya, right from beginning. It's not a gradual process. It's not that you give up little by little. So if we really want to follow the Advaitic path, then we should be prepared to make tremendous sacrifices. So now coming to the other method, which is a slower but a sure method, that is known as the method of dhyana, which is a mixture of Patanjali's yoga and also tantras as well as some Vedantic ideas. That is concentrating the mind on the object. Depending on the nature of the object, it is of two types: Patanjala or yogic meditation, or Vedantic or Vedant tantric and Vedantic types. They are known as Upasana. So Patanjali type we will not discuss now. We are discussing it in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. We will come to the aspect of dhyana there, but there are so many steps before we reach the state of dhyana. But when we do dharana, when we concentrate the mind, you can concentrate on any object, external or internal. That is what Patanjali does. They don't give so much importance to a particular mantra or to a particular Ishta or deity and all those things. Because for them, you concentrate the mind on anything and it will reveal its secret to you. So if you choose a wrong object, you may get the knowledge of that object. So that is how all the great discoveries in science are made. It's nothing but full concentration. When you concentrate fully on an object, then you know more and more secrets. You go deeper and deeper and understand the subtleties behind that external phenomena or object or anything that you focus your study on. So that dhyana, concentrating the mind on any object, according to Patanjali, slowly, if we follow the right path, even that objective study, that object will lead you to Purusha. Whether that object can be external or internal. As Swami Vivekananda once said, whenever I feel like I sometimes meditate on the heart of the land, so that gives me tremendous strength. So people have been using, Patanjali does not deny that such meditations give rise. The danger is that these types of meditation can have, can bind you to the world. It has a tendency to, people have a tendency to get stuck, because if you choose the wrong object and the wrong way, if sufficient yama, niyama and other steps are not followed, if vairagya is not there, that abhyasa can lead to some powers which again will lead you to greater and greater bondage. From gross bondage, you will be trapped in some subtle bondage. So though he says this path you have to avoid these powers, but in the sadhana vibhuti pada, the third, he describes these powers because he is a true scientist. He does not say that everybody has to have a spiritual goal. So Patanjali's yoga is not what we are discussing today. The Vedantic or the Tantric type, which is a combination of both Vedanta and Tantra, is what is known as Upasana. It literally means Upasana, sitting near the deity. So there is a deity. Without deity, our Upasana is incomplete. There has to be a deity and there has to be a mantra. Now, what is the difference between this Patanjali's meditation of Raj Yoga and Vedantic meditation? The structure, everything is same, but the object is different. There is any object is prescribed, whereas here it depends a lot on the type of mantra and the type of ishta that you choose. So difference between the two RS, you can just make a distinction between these two meditations, that in Patanjali's yoga, as you say, you can concentrate on any object. It may be a flower or even flame. There are many ideas, or even an idea. You can meditate on an idea. But in Vedantic or Tantric meditation, each upasana that you do, whatever upasana you do, is not just concentration, but you have to establish a living relationship between the inner self and the supreme self, who is also, according to Vedanta, known as Ishvara or God. In Tantras, you may call it Shiva or Shiva and Shakti, but you have to have a living relationship with this supreme self. It is, you just have to consider him as the manifestation of the supreme Brahman and have a living relationship. That makes your sadhana a bit easy, because we understand human relationship. We understand the relationship between a child and a father, a child and a mother. So there is some kind of intimate relationship which we understand because we have experienced that in our life, but we have to establish that same relationship with God or Ishvara. Then the whole scene changes. All our sorrow goes away, or everything vanishes. So this upasana helps you to overcome the limitations of human attachment, because anything that is not Sat, Chit and Ananda, the Supreme Self, any lower attachment will bind you more and more. So that is the idea, that you don't have to you have to meditate on the Supreme Self or Ishvara as somebody who is your own, and have a living relationship with him. God assumes according to the Tantras, the personal God or Ishvara, as he is known in Vedanta, the manifestation of God in this universe, the cosmic mind, is also known as a deity. And upasana means intense focused concentration on this particular deity with the help of a mantra. Every deity that you choose, every deity, it can be any deity, is known as Ishta Devata, the chosen deity. Ishta means that which you like, that which you love, that which is very dear to you. He should be the dearest of all. That is one condition which this type of initiation lays down before an aspirant, that he should be the dearest. All others, you can have other relationships, but this relationship is eternal, and that is why one has to take it very seriously. This should be an aspect of divinity for which you have great attraction or great love. So you have to very carefully choose the deity on whom you are going to meditate, because you should have spontaneous love for that deity. So the deity should be one for whom you have spontaneous and supreme devotion or love. So you must be able to pour your whole heart, as it were, and soul on the deity. That is why Jesus said in the Bible, love God with all thy mind, with all thy heart, with all thy will, and with all thy soul. Using all the four faculties of the human mind, one has to love him through with all thy heart means through emotions, through thoughts, through will, through cognition, through willpower, and soul means with the whole being surrendered to that Supreme Lord. So that is how Jesus advises the his followers to love God or Ishvara, whom they call as Father in heaven, our Father in heaven, or our Father, God the Father, who is the creator, who is the Ishvara, who is the supreme controller of this whole universe. That is the idea. So now then after having done that, this alone is a type of meditation. This kind of upasana becomes effective. Simply concentrating, just as you concentrate on a flame or a flower, as Patanjali advises, just as you concentrate on any flower or an ordinary picture, even the picture will not mean much. Upasana means a devotional concentration on the Ishta Devata. This is normally the type of meditation that is followed in the Ramakrishna order. So this is the background. So Upasana now has three aspects. This kind of upasana. Now we will not be discussing about the other methods. We will focus on what exactly is this kind of initiation which combines Vedanta and the Tantras. Now, Upasana has three aspects. When you fix up an Ishta, when you decide to worship or focus on a certain Ishta and develop a relationship with him, then there is the first thing that you have to do is visualization, which has a technical name which is known as bhavana. Visualization means to visualize the Lord. Normally, you are asked to visualize within. We'll come to that. Then it involves, the first part is visualization or bhavana of the Lord. Combine that with repetition of the mantra, which is known as Japa. So one is visualization, bhavana, another is Japa. So Japa and bhavana, plus where do we do it? Concentration at a particular center of consciousness. As you know, according to the Tantras, that is where Tantra comes in. This idea is not there in the Vedanta, though they say you meditate in the heart. But Tantras have found out, that is why it is known as Tantra. Tantra means technology. If Vedanta is a science, Vedanta of course has its own technology, which can be yoga. There are many other technologies, but the science of sadhana, the technology of sadhana, the practical aspects of sadhana is what is known as Tantra. Tantra shows you the method. So Tantras say that our spinal cord, where our nervous energy goes from the base of the spine to the brain and then it goes up and down, has been divided, or there are 6 levels, and the 7th is of course the Sahasrara. They are known as chakras. What do you mean by these chakras? They are known as centers of consciousness. What do you mean by center of consciousness? When the center of consciousness is at the lowest point, you are terribly attached to the body. The world, the gross world becomes intensely real to us, to that person whose center of consciousness is at the Mooladhara. When you raise it, the consciousness up to the stomach or the second center of consciousness, then you will find that other things, the creative urge and the so many other urges which you have to earn money and all those things, to eat good food, to all the other functions, slightly higher functions, they start developing, because it's all depends on where your consciousness is, particular center of consciousness. So it is like there are 6 stories. On the ground floor you have certain facilities, you go to the first floor, there are certain facilities, you go to the third floor, there are certain facilities. The higher you go, naturally the more subtle this center of consciousness becomes. So when you come to the heart center, they say you have to focus on that. The reason being is that is the center where you find the Jivatma or the Pratyagatman as it is known. We'll come to that fact, we'll not discuss it now. But 3 things you have to remember in Upasana. One is visualization of the Ishta, because the name and form cannot be separated. That is another wonderful tantric idea, that in the beginning was the word was with God, and the word was God. The word, then Nama, the moment Nama comes, the Rupa also comes. That is how the tantric sadhana, the sadhana in Tantras and Vedanta, the whole world is made of Nama and Rupa. So you can't separate. If you can visualize certain thing, it has to have a name. And that is the mantra, Japa. So the deity on whom you meditate and the mantra that you repeat are inseparable. So you have to remember that. And concentration at a particular center of consciousness, this is the third aspect. So first you visualize, repeat the mantra, and fix a center of consciousness where your stability, where your sadhana can be. We choose the heart because heart is a place where you can it is that aspect of the mind. Of course, the mind has a subtle aspect which is known as buddhi, that dhi, which enables you to have a glimpse of the consciousness or touch the supreme consciousness. As we discussed in our previous class, the class which we had from 7 to 8, that the consciousness, the pure consciousness, percolates or shines through the body and mind. But one aspect, because the mind is more subtle than the body, the center of the body, that is center of the nervous system, which is known as the Anahata Chakra, or the center of consciousness, which is known as the spiritual heart, to discover that heart and to meditate there is another important function of Upasana. So visualization of the Ishta, repetition of the mantra, and concentration at a particular center of consciousness. Now, in the beginning, we said the role of Guru. I mean, what does the Guru do what is the Guru's role in this? There are four functions of a Guru. The first function is, as we have described just now, to show us how to meditate. Of course, how to meditate is not what he invents himself. It has to come through a tradition. We'll speak about that tradition afterwards, because it's not some haphazard or according to his whims and fancies he will ask you to meditate. It has to come through a succession of gurus. So that is the idea. If there is no succession, anybody and everybody can't say that I am starting a tradition. Of course, people, prophets and great avatars can start a tradition, but not lesser gurus. They have to belong to certain tradition, because these things are mystical things, and the path, or it should not be a haphazard or some kind of path which has no validity. It has to be a trusted or a time tested path, which several gurus before that, the chain of gurus or the succession of gurus, that same path would have been followed by them, validated by them, and experiences, the experiences that are unique to that path should have been experienced by these gurus. So that is why the first function is to show a disciple, one who takes initiation, is to how to meditate. But that is not all. There are three other functions which happen during initiation. What is the second function? The second function is to impart spiritual power. Now, what does it mean? It is not just like an ordinary professor in ordinary education. You can learn from books, or you can learn from somebody who just tells you some technique and then leaves you to yourself. No, that is not there. That is not what the teacher and the taught tradition is in this Upasana. The Guru not only shows the right path, is not only supposed to show the right path, but also has to transmit some spiritual power by which the disciple gets awakening. Now the question is, how can this mantra transmit spiritual power? That will be asked. That question naturally you will ask. The mantra can be found in books. Of course, these mantras are not there in the books, but even take for granted that somebody writes it down and circulates it. Will that lead to spiritual awakening? No. How does the mantra lead to spiritual awakening? So, in order to answer this, it's a very complex question. To understand this, first we have to know something about ourselves. What is the nature of man? To know how this mantra, which has been handed over from guru to disciple in a tradition, how does it transmit? How does it lead to spiritual awakening? That is the process which we have to understand. So we discussed how that we are this ocean of consciousness which we want to touch, because our mind and body limits the way, does not reflect the whole entire consciousness, and that is why we struggle. So we will not discuss that. We discussed it in the previous class. So we will just skip what we discussed in the previous class, and we'll just come to this point, that the consciousness that we speak of, the supreme consciousness, the underlying consciousness of Brahman which we are trying to attain, cannot be known. It is known as Chaitanya also, Chaitana or Chaitanya, cannot be known by the ordinary mind. The mind as we have now, the normal mind, the reactive mind, which we call the mind, which enables us to do a lot many things. It can enable to get a university degree, a PhD. This is not an ordinary mind. It is definitely, the mind has wonderful powers. and it can be used to do anything in this world. But that is not what is sufficient to understand what this consciousness is. The consciousness, that consciousness, the supreme consciousness or Brahman, which will remove all our sorrows if, for good. It is a eternal security that we will get if we touch that supreme consciousness. That is what all the religions, all the spiritual prophets, all the gurus, they tell the same thing, that unless you touch the ocean of consciousness. You see, I gave the example of the ocean. There are waves, big waves, small waves, each one clashing against each other. There is a lot of commotion. So also the ocean of body and mind, the vast ocean where so many souls are jumping about. There are clashes, there are ego problems, there are sorrows, there are sicknesses, the body suffers, the mind suffers. All this turmoil that is going on is at the surface. And we saw how going to the bottom of the ocean, everything becomes calm. So to understand what that pure consciousness is, one cannot use the restless mind. The mind, which may be very useful if we want to deal with the objects of the world. We want that intelligence, we want to make money, all those things it may help, but it will not enable you to see pure consciousness. That's why Jesus said you can't have God and mammon at the same time. If that mind is given to money, you can't use the same mind to understand that consciousness. So that consciousness is, this consciousness cannot be known through the ordinary mind, with which we can do a large number, we can perform a large number of, great number of tasks. We can do so many, we can become research scientists, we can become a genius. So many things can be attained with the training of the mind. But with that mind, that gross mind, that reactive mind, we cannot understand or touch this consciousness which will solve our problem, which will give us moksha, mukti, freedom, salvation, whatever name you may give it. So for that one needs a divya chakshu, or the divine vision, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, the Vishwarup Darshana, where he tells Arjuna, you can't see this form of mind with these ordinary eyes or the ordinary mind. You need a special subtle spiritual mind, which is known as buddhi, or the dhi, or the heart, the spiritual heart. So the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, the Kathopanishad, every Upanishad will speak of the vision, or the realization of that consciousness in the spiritual heart. So what is this spiritual heart? So there are sometimes exceptional cases where by the grace of the Lord, the spiritual heart is suddenly awakened. But normally this purified heart, through our ordinary eyes and ordinary mind, we can't realize or have the vision of our deity or the pure consciousness on which we are meditating. But by a purified heart, which is known as buddhi, we can know this God, or we can know this pure consciousness. This purified heart is known as buddhi and di. That is why at the time of initiation, one instruction that is given, almost invariably all the methods of initiation, they ask you to meditate on the lotus of 8 petals, the Ashtadala Padma, it is normally known, it's normally called the spiritual heart. Now you may ask why there are 8 petals. It's a very long thing, I will not discuss now. But right now let us take it as arbitrary. It's not the lotus that is important, but there is a tradition where people have not only visualized but experienced these chakras. So anyway, normally the guru instructs the disciple to concentrate on the heart center. This is how we find the heart center. So as I said, there are 3 things to be done in Upasana. One is visualization, which is known as bhavana, the repetition of the mantra, which is nama and rupa, and then finding the center of consciousness where you should meditate on the Ishta. So one may imagine a light or something in that heart center, something luminous, because consciousness is that which gives you light, that gives you clarity. It's not just the physical light, but we can use that as a bhavana, as a visualization. In the heart, you meditate on the Ishta full of light. So unless that heart center, the Ashtadala Padma, that is said, the lotus of 8 petals, is awakened, the spiritual experience that you will have is out of question. It is beyond our capacity to have a spiritual vision. You just won't have it. Even if some people say that I had a dream and I saw something, some people have visions even with open eyes, but they may be hallucinations, they may not be real visions, because a real vision is only possible if this heart center, or this heart, the subtle mind, or the mind which is the spiritual mind, or the buddhi, is awakened. Until and unless this heart center is awakened by constant meditation on the Ishta and repetition of the mantra japa, how the japa does that, how does the visualization help that, these are two aspects that we have to understand. We will discuss it in the course of this talk. So the main task in spiritual life is to awaken this heart center, which is also known as a higher intuitive faculty. Now, for some people, maybe because of their past life, good karma of their past lives, this intuitive faculty awakens very quickly. The higher mind, called buddhi, it is actually a mind. It's not the physical heart or anything to do with the heart. It is that faculty of the mind which is known as the heart. The spiritual heart is actually a higher mind which is known as buddhi, or Divya Chakshu, as Sri Krishna named it. I am giving you that divine visualization or divine eyes. Eyes means not just to see that form, but to see that form unique. It is seen through the prism of the mind, a purified mind. A highly purified mind is what enables you to get a glimpse of that Satchidananda or consciousness. So it is dormant, it is there. Everybody, every human being has a right. It's a divine right, because that consciousness is the common substratum of all. Only thing we don't manifest it. So each soul is potentially divine. It is dormant. How to awaken it is the whole purpose of Upasana or mantra japa and sadhana. According to the Upanishad, it lies in that heart, the divine self or the divine consciousness. In the mantra shastra or mantra yoga, it is known as Ananda Kanda. This 8 petal which I was referring to is known as the 8 petals of joy. It is 8 petaled red lotus of joy. It has a specific name in Tantra, in mantra yoga, mantra shastra. It is known as Ananda Kanda. Kanda means petals. So Ananda Kanda, it is a flower of 8 petals. So that is symbolic of joy. The 8 petals, they are the 8 petals of joy. If you see the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna had a vision of each of these petals. It's not something which is there only in the books. It has been experienced. Some people have experienced even without reading the books. As you see in the case of Swami Adbhutananda, he was listening to Kathopanishad, the description in the Kathopanishad which gives the first realization of the Jivatma or the Pratyagatman as of the size of a thumb, a light, a bright shining light of the size of the thumb. Now that is what he actually realized. So he was so overjoyed. He said, "You are saying the right thing." So the verification came later. It's not that by reading the books he got that experience. He got the experience first, and it was confirmed. He was happy that the Shastras also say the same thing. So this Ananda Kanda or the 8 petal lotus is what we have to meditate on. And that when you meditate, you first find the center of consciousness. Simultaneously, your visualization becomes more and more intense. Your bhavana becomes intense. The mantra japa becomes more and more subtle. And this awakening of the buddhi, which you have to do first, of course, it is all happen simultaneously. You don't wait till you perfect your visualization and you perfect your mantra repetition. Nama, Rupa, and this awakening of the center of consciousness all have to go simultaneously. It is a combined effort. You have to use all the resources at your command to intensify your upasana, feel intensely. That can be easy in this kind of sadhana if you consider the Ishta on whom you are meditating as your own. You see, you don't have to tell a child to love its mother. You can't train the child. You can't tell him, you meditate on, take a mother's photo and focus on it, and then you meditate on it. That becomes mechanical. But if you know the mother is yours, then for you, that kind of attraction or a relationship with the mother, of a child to the mother, becomes so natural that you don't need anybody to explain to you all these things. So that is a very important part of the upasana. Upasana literally means sitting near. So what happens when you sit near? You sit near somebody whom you love. You definitely don't go near a person whom you don't love. So it is very, very essential, apart from the visualization and the repetition of the mantra, you find the center of your heart, the center, the buddhi, awaken your buddhi, the heart center, open the heart center, and place that Ashtadala Padma is. That is why in meditation, you have to meditate on the red lotus and imagine your Ishta, whoever that Ishta may be, and meditate on that. So this, how to awaken this buddhi or the spiritual heart? It is very easy to say, but people will definitely ask, how can it be done? It cannot be awakened through ordinary effort. It's not that you just sit for a few months and then it awakens. In order to know how awakening of the heart takes place, we should know something about the dynamics of our human mind. Because it's not the heart, it is the mind that is awake, becomes more and more subtle and awakens. Only then, if we understand the dynamics of the human mind, then we can understand how this buddhi is awakened. Now, according to Tantras, this is another aspect which is not there in the Vedantas, but Tantras have found out that the sum total of all our psychic energy is known as Kundalini. This is a technical meaning of the word Kundalini. Kundalini does not mean anything else. Don't confuse it with all the peculiar sensations that you feel in the spinal cord when you meditate. It has nothing to do with that. It is a very difficult thing to awaken. It is the sum total of all your psychic energy. The energy with which you perceive the universe, the energy with which you hear, think, do everything, practically all the nervous energy or the psychic energy, if you can prefer to call it by that name, just not let us say it is nervous energy, because nervous energy is responsible for our digestion and all our autonomous nervous system. I am talking only of the psychic energy, the energy of the mind, which gives that wonderful quality to our mind. That the sum total of the entire psychic energy of your personality, of our personality, is known as Kundalini. Now, where does it stay? Is it normally? It is not awakened. In ordinary human beings, we don't need it. We are capable of running our body, our mind, and leading a life even without awakening the Kundalini. Don't think it is a very easy thing to awaken, because it is coiled up. Coiled means it is in a potential form in the base of the spine. That is what they say. That is what the yogis say. Now, Kundalini is so called because it is coiled up. That is why it is known as Kundalini. The word Kundalini means that which is coiled up. It is just like a snake, but it has nothing to do with snake or a serpent. People very often say that it is like a serpent, which is coiled up normally, but when somebody instigates it, when somebody awakens that snake, the snake raises its hood. That is just a symbology, a symbol, but it has nothing to do, neither it has anything to do with the snake. The whole psychic energy lies in that base of the spinal cord, the nervous or the mental energies in an unmanifest form, avyakta. It is generally symbolized as a serpent, but as I told you, there's nothing to do. It's like a coiled up serpent. When it is awakened, just to show that when it awakens, it rises up, just to show that this simile is used. So people normally have a strange kind of imagination. After reading Raj Yoga and many other books nowadays, so many books on tantras are available. The chakras and this kundalini, they have become commonplace terms. and people think they are so easy or so easy to understand. They are extremely complex things which require a tremendous purity of purpose and mind and sadhana and upasana to awaken it. It just does not awaken because you do a few exercises and do a few mantras. It is not so easy. The first condition is a very uh, you can say pure life, a life which is not very gross, which is focused more on subtle things, on higher things of life. Only such a person, if somebody who has base desires, his gross says his kundalini has risen, there's something wrong. It is just a psychic problem. There's absolutely no kundalini in that. So, what is meant that generally this psychic energy or kundalini is influencing all our psychic activities, all the activities that we do, all the complexes that we have. Every human being has so many complexes, mental complexes. There are so many now. You have this restlessness of the mind. Now there are so many psychological terms now created, ADHD, then there is autism. There are so many uh, functions of the psychic energy, which if disturbed causes mental imbalances. What we see as the psychic imbalance, all our psychic activities, all our thinking, which is abnormal for some reason, they are the result of this disturbance in this psychic energy. All our thoughts, emotions are controlled. If you are highly emotional, if you have a split personality, hundreds of names have been invented. All this is because of this psychic energy. We are using it. It's not that it is influencing, but not in a proper way. But only a very little of that energy rises up into the spine. Normally, our autonomous nervous system does most of the things, and with very minute fraction. That is why when we discuss this topic of the Vedanta and the science of human possibilities, of course, Vedanta and Tantra and the science of human possibilities, we have to also explore this possibility of arousing this Kundalini power, because a small fraction, according to the yogis, according to the tantras, even the greatest genius is using a very little of this psychic energy, and it does not go up the spine. The energy in a majority of the people, this Kundalini passes through, the psychic energy passes through the two channels which are known as Ida and Pingala. If you take a spinal cord and cut it, take a cross section, it has the shape of 8. So this Kundalini, when it rises through either Ida and Pingala. And there is a middle channel which is known as the Sushumna Nadi, which is a hollow. That is the main channel through which the whole psychic energy can flow. Right now, only a little of that energy flows through the Ida and Pingala, the efferent and efferent nerves, which is responsible for all our actions, all our day-to-day activities, all our thinking, all our emotional activities, all our problems, all our complexes. Everything is because the nervous energy, the psychic energy is passing through the Ida and Pingala, not through the Sushumna. Now, the idea is, unfortunately, the Sushumna Nadi, or the hollow between the spine, is closed in majority of the people. It is unless you uh, try very hard and practice upasana. That is how this mantra comes into the picture, and the visualization, the bhavana, the mantra, and finding the center of consciousness, focusing on the opening of the heart center, and all those things will help us to make this psychic energy flow through the Sushumna. As a result, the psychic energy, instead of, in normal people, instead of flowing through the Sushumna, flows through the side channels. And when that happens, what happens to the human being? The mind becomes restless. When you see a restless mind, that means most of the psychic energy is passing through the two channels. Even if we manage to pass a little of that energy through the Sushumna, we regain our mental balance. All the restlessness, the various psychic problems that we face, the restlessness which people do not seem how to handle it, the attention deficiency, hyperactivity disorder, and all those things, What is this attention deficient? Just because the mind is restless. That's all. We don't have to give big names for that. If the mind is, the more the mind is restless, it means that the energy, the psychic energy is passing through Ida and Pingala uh, in a great measure. And when we stop that through sadhana, through mantra, upasana, and make it pass through the hollow, then we are slowly get rid, or uh, the body and mind will have less control over us, because it is passing through the, it is just like uh, electricity. When we pass it through the wire, if the wire is broken, the electricity does not pass. But somehow if it is wireless, then there is no obstruction. It passes through the hollow, through the space. So that is exactly the same principle. The psychic energy can pass unobstructed if sadhana is done properly. If somehow we find our center of consciousness and also activate it, find out the center of consciousness, use visualization, use bhavana, and also use the nama japa to support it. Because nama and visualization, you remember, they are like two cotyledons of the same seed. You can't separate. When the seeds are together, then slowly the sprout comes. You see, any seed, it has two cotyledons. One is nama, the other is rupa. What mantra does is, the cotyledons have to be close together. When you have nama, you don't have rupa. When you have rupa, you don't have nama. So when you do mantra and you do visualization along with it, it enables the psychic energy to pass through this kundalini. So using our willpower, we can reduce our restlessness. The first thing that happens is, mind, both the body also becomes less restless. There is steadiness. That is what Patanjali aims externally by doing asana and controlling the prana. He tries to make the body steady. Whereas in mantra yoga or upasana, the moment you stop the restlessness of the mind, channelize the psychic energy through the hollow, then by the rhythmic chanting of the mantra. Now this rhythmic chanting has a wonderful effect. It increases our willpower. It opens that channel. But it has to be done rhythmically. That is why they say undercurrent of the mantra. Holy Mother used to say, she used to repeat 1 lakh japa every day. So she says japa siddhi, japa siddhi. What did she mean? If we can't do the visualization, at least if we repeat the name, the rhythmic chanting of the mantra which one receives during initiation from the Guru, what happens is that the activity of Ida and Pingala, which where our psychic energy is wasted and makes us restless, absolutely restless, that is checked. And a psychic pressure is exerted at the base of the Sushumna. When this practice is kept up for some time, when you continuously do japa very silently, we should not overdo it, because suddenly opening also may lead to problems. We have to do it very gradually. Slight pressure, we have to, it exerts, automatically it exerts. First, it stops the Ida and Pingala from transferring our psychic energy to the head, to the brain. And when that happens, first thing that you notice is you become less restless. The mind also, restlessness of the mind is a great obstacle to sadhana. One should have control over our minds. The restlessness can be stopped only if the psychic energy through japa, through upasana, through bhavana, and through repeating of the mantra is rhythmical. This rhythmic repetition is what opens the Sushumna. It exerts some pressure and the Sushumna Nadi opens. The Nadi means it is a hollow actually between the spinal cord. It's in the center of the spinal cord. Anybody who knows anatomy, if you cut, there is a small hollow. Of course, there is the cerebrospinal fluid, but still the Sushumna Nadi opens and the psychic energy flows through this. This Sushumna Nadi strikes the heart center. When it reaches the heart from the base of the spine, that is how the chakras open. And when it reaches the heart center, the awakening of the heart center takes place. That is the first task we have to do with the help. Once that happens, then meditation becomes easy. That is how the heart lotus, which is generally pictured as a bud drooping downward, the red 8 petals are drooping downward, they just stand erect and blooms. This is when the psychic energy flowing through the sushumna strikes it. It gives life to that bud. In most of us, when we meditate, we cannot even visualize the heart center. That has to be awakened. Only then, when you get that experience, one sees, according to the Tantras, a mysterious light, the light of consciousness, the light of buddhi. Only after this awakening, the spiritual life really begins. So, God is ultimately connected with us at that point. The Ishvara, the Ishta that on whom we meditate, the bright, wonderful figure of the Ishta becomes alive only when this awakening takes place. So, what is the immediate experience that happens as you do go on doing Upasana? It is the awakening of the heart. So, we will continue tomorrow. We have already, I've already taken, it's 9:35 now. So, we'll conclude and then we'll, tomorrow, if we cannot complete this, maybe we'll take one more class, because it appears that these things require great lot of explanation. So today we have come to the point where the spiritual awakening, that is what Gayatri mantra does. That's why they say Gayatri merges into Om. Every mantra will come to that. What are the constituents of the mantra? It begins with Om, there is a bija, there is a name, and all those things. But when Thakur says, when Sri Ramakrishna says Gayatri merges into Om, what he means, what is really meant is, the Gayatri means awakening of the spiritual heart. Dhiyo yona prachodayata. So this spiritual heart, awakening of the spiritual heart by reducing the restlessness of the mind and focusing on the heart center, the drooping 8-petal lotus blooms, as it were. That's a visualization. Of course, yogis have seen that. Those who have practiced sadhana, upasana, they've seen that. And then the inner self, the heart center, which is also known as Pratyagatman. We will discuss what it is. It is known as the individual soul. It is known as Pratyagatman. In Kathopanishad, the Yama is explaining to Nachiketa, the self-existent Supreme Lord inflicted upon the sense organs in creating them with outgoing tendencies. So the moment we stop the outgoing tendencies, the moment we stop the psychic energy from making our mind restless and passing through Ida and Pingala, so he says the Lord seated within makes our mind restless by making us see the objects around them, objects outside, and not the inner self. But a calm person, a dhiraha, kashchit dhira, who amrutatvam icchan, beholds the inner self with his eyes closed. The moment he closes, refuses to allow the psychic currents to go through the Ida and Pingala, and waits for the heart center to open. By closing his eyes, he realizes that Pratyaga Atmanam Aikshat Avruta Chakshu. By closing his eyes. Closing his eyes means reduce the distractions. When you reduce your distractions, when you focus inside, that is the beginning of spiritual life. So Mantra Diksha begins, the Upasana which is being given during Mantra Diksha starts with the opening of the center of consciousness at the heart, which is known as Shatadala, not Shatadala, Ashtadala Padma, which opens, and when it blooms, your spiritual life actually begins. Then the visualization, bhavana, and the repetition of the mantra becomes more effective. So that Pratyagatman, what is that Pratyagatman? Shankaracharya, commenting on this verse, says that which is Pratyak. Pratyak means in the interior, and the same time it is Atma. Pratyak Atma. What is Atma? Atma is the all-pervading self. But for us, Pratyak means interior, not outside, inside. Atma means the self. So what is the inner self? In common usage, the word Atma means the individual soul and not anything else. When you say Aham Atma Gudakesh, I am that Atman, that supreme self, for us at this moment is the Pratyagatman. That is the first thing we have to awaken. So Since it pervades, absorbs, enjoys all the objects, and the world derives its continuous existence because of this Pratyagatman. We see things, we enjoy things, we feel sorrow, we experience all these things because of this indwelling self, which is the own reality. But after Upasana, when this is just in the beginning of the Upasana, we awaken the Pratyagatman, we awaken the Dhi. It is not the supreme self or supreme consciousness or Ishvara. We are still yet to reach it. That is the goal of Upasana. But in the initial stages, we find the center of consciousness, which is in the heart, and identify ourselves with that. Even that is a great achievement. Once we do that, then our spiritual life begins. So we will discuss it tomorrow at about 8:30. And if there are some questions, let me see. There's one question. It is difficult to visualize and meditate at the same time, as visualization involves using the mind. If I have understood correctly, in meditation, we are trying not to use the mind. Please, no. This is wrong. Visualization also is in the mind. The repetition of the japa is also in the mind. So they have to be not, I'm not saying they have to be done simultaneously. It never happens. You can't multitask. It happens one after another, but it should follow each other in rapid succession. If that happens, or otherwise you can either visualize or either repeat the japa. Japa actually leads to visualization, bhavana. So nama japa, that is mantra japa, leads to bhavana. So I'm not saying it should be done. Even if it is done when we meditate, at the same time repeat the mantra, in both the cases mind is involved. So mantra purifies the mind. We'll come to that in the next tomorrow's class. I will answer your question at that time. Now we were discussing regarding what a guru does to his disciples. You answered 2 points: how to meditate and impart spiritual power. I have missed the other 2 pointers. No, there are other 2 points have not yet come. We will discuss it after tomorrow, or maybe if you don't come to the third and fourth point, we will discuss it afterwards. The first 2 I'm just now, the second, how to impart spiritual power, that itself is not finished. So we will discuss it afterwards, the other 2 things, because the second thing, the imparting of spiritual power, is through mantra. And that, to understand that, we have to understand what kundalini is. Then we'll understand the power of mantra, the mantra shakti, the bija. It's a long topic and it requires some patience to understand it. So we'll do it tomorrow. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.